It is said there are places where joy gathers so quietly that even the birds lower their voices, not because they fear it, only because they recognize something sacred moving through the air, something delicate, like a candle flame held in open hands. In one such place, beneath a sky the color of soft dawn, a field lies wide and unguarded. Tall grass sways in slow waves, and each blade catches the sunlight as if it has been dusted with faint gold. The wind does not rush, it drifts. It brushes past wildflowers, pale and small, like a blessing that does not want to be noticed. And there, in that ordinary holiness, a promise begins. Not with a lyre, not with a grand declaration, but with a breath held for an instant too long, a pause between one heartbeat and the next, a hush that arrives before words, as if the earth itself is listening for what will be spoken. Eurydice moves through the grass with the gentleness of someone who has learned to live inside the present. Her steps leave no harsh marks. Even the stems that bend beneath her rise again slowly, as though they understand her care. She is not a symbol yet, not a name carved into myth. She is simply a woman in sunlight, carrying the quiet wonder of being alive. Orpheus follows at a distance, not from coldness, but from reverence. Some love does not rush to claim. Some love lingers, allowing space for the world to remain soft around the beloved. He watches her as one might watch moonlight on water, knowing that the beauty of it is partly in its distance. Whispers tell us that Orpheus was different from the beginning, not because he was loud, not because he demanded attention, but because he could stand in silence without needing to fill it. He listened to stones the way others listened to teachers. He listened to trees the way others listened to stories. And when he finally played, when music rose from his hands, it was not entertainment. It was prayer. It was an offering made to the hidden order of things. In forgotten corners of the earth, music has always been more than sound. It has been a bridge, a thread, a breath that can move between worlds. The ancients did not always separate art from ritual. They understood that melody could be a kind of key, soft enough to carry through the air, strong enough to touch the unseen. And so, in this warm field, wedding songs begin like half-remembered dreams. A few notes hummed under the breath, a laugh that dissolves into quiet. Garlands of pale flowers are woven with patient hands, each petal placed as if it matters. Because it does. Because love in its earliest hour is made of small things. A glance, a shared silence, the way a name is spoken gently so it does not break. Yet beneath the sweetness, a question rests, unasked but present, like a shadow underwater. How can love feel so complete and still be fragile as dust? Beneath the silence, the day carries its own subtle omen. Not a thunderclap, not a warning shouted from the sky, only the strange way the shadows lengthen a little too early, as if time is already turning its face away. Only the faint veil at the edge of the scene, thin as mist, where the field seems to blur into something older, something watching. Some believe that myths begin this way on purpose, with warmth and simplicity, with the world at peace, so that the ache of what follows can be felt more deeply. Others believe the universe has always spoken in patterns, and that every blessing arrives with a hidden gate. A gate does not always look like stone. Sometimes it looks like a moment you wish would last forever. Orpheus, in the quiet after song, seems to know this without saying it. He does not clutch happiness as if it might flee. He lets it rest. He lets it breathe. He holds Eurydice's presence the way one holds a fragile relic, carefully with respect, with a tenderness that does not demand proof. Marked by the moon, even in daylight, there are places in the heart where the future feels faintly inevitable. In those places, joy can be haunted, not by fear, but by awareness, as if somewhere beyond the horizon, the world is already writing the next page. The field, for a time, does not notice. It continues its slow ceremony of summer. Bees wander like small pilgrims from bloom to bloom. The wind lifts and falls again. And in this gentle rhythm, the lovers stand surrounded by ordinary life, the kind that feels eternal when you are inside it. Yet the story, like a sacred scroll, has already been touched by a shadowed finger. It is said that even here, before the underworld is named, the underworld is near. not as threat, but as presence. The ancients believed that the boundary between worlds is not always far away. It can be as close as the root beneath your foot, the hollow in an old tree, the dark mouth of a cave you pass without looking. And perhaps that is the secret beginning of all such tales, that we live always beside the unseen, that love blossoms in full daylight, while the earth keeps its ancient doors beneath. The deeper meaning of this quiet promise is not only romance, it is the human wish to make something lasting in a world that changes. It is the sacred attempt to say, stay, to a moment that cannot stay, to weave garlands and vows as if they could bind time itself. In the softest part of the afternoon, the air grows still, so still that the grass seems to pause mid-sway. Birds quiet their calls. Even the insects soften their hum, as though an invisible procession is passing. Orpheus looks up, and for a heartbeat, his gaze seems to travel beyond the field, beyond the hills, into a distance no one else can see. He does not speak of it. He simply breathes slowly, as if placing his attention around the moment like a protective circle. Eurydice turns her face toward him, and the light rests on her features with a tenderness that feels almost ceremonial. The world for a breath holds them in a kind of blessing. And then, only then, does the chapter reveal its final hush. Somewhere unseen, a thin thread tightens. Not violently, not loudly, just enough to suggest that the story has begun moving, even if no one yet feels it. The promise remains, soft, bright, unbearably tender, like starlight caught in a small bowl of water. The field looks the same, the sky looks the same, and yet beneath it all, the air suggests that time has already started to turn its face away. Perhaps the tragedy of this promise is not that it will end. Everything ends. Perhaps the tragedy is simply that it was so beautiful that the world could not help but remember it. And when sleep approaches, when the mind begins to loosen its grip on daylight, this is what the field leaves in us. A quiet certainty that love can be holy even when it is brief. A gentle wonder that the most sacred moments often arrive without warning and depart without sound. And a final whisper, fading into the tall grass. Perhaps it was never meant to be held, only meant to be felt. It is said that night does not fall all at once. First, the light simply softens, as if the sky grows tired of holding its brightness. Then the colors begin to fade, gold becoming ash, green becoming shadow. The field that felt endless in daylight begins to gather borders. Even the air seems to lower its voice. And somewhere, beneath that quiet change, something ancient wakes. In forgotten corners of the earth, people once believed that dusk was not merely an hour. It was a veil, a time when the world of breathing things and the world of hidden things moved a little closer together, when thresholds grew thin, when old laws written in silence could be felt in the bones. On this night, the grass still stands tall, but the spaces between it deepen. The wind cools. A faint mist begins to form low to the ground, like a thought that refuses to leave. The stars are not fully visible yet, but their presence is hinted, like a promise tucked inside darkness. Eurydice steps away, only a few paces. Not because she is fleeing, not because she is careless, but because the field is familiar, and familiarity can make a place feel safe even when it is changing. She moves toward a darker patch where the grass grows thicker, where the soil feels cooler and secretive. The world does not warn her loudly. It does not shout her name. It simply allows her to drift into a pocket of shadow, as gently as a dream slipping deeper. Beneath the silence, something stirs. Not a monster in the way later stories will paint it. Not a battle, not a spectacle. The object at the heart of this chapter is smaller than that. Quiet, certain, old as the earth itself. A serpent. A thin line of living shadow, moving through roots and damp soil as if it has been summoned by an invisible command. It does not hiss to announce itself. It does not perform. It is simply there, silent, purposeful, like a keeper placed at a door. Whispers tell us that serpents were never only animals in the ancient imagination. They were symbols of boundary, of change, of the hidden places where one world slips into another. They live close to the ground, close to cracks in stone, close to the dark mouths of holes that disappear into the earth. Some believed they guarded sacred sites. Others believed they carried messages from below. Either way, they belonged to thresholds. And in this night, the threshold has come to the field. The myth does not shout here, it whispers, as if even tragedy must be gentle at midnight. The moment happens with the softness of a candle being extinguished. A quick sting, a sharp inhale, a small sound swallowed immediately by the grass. Then, stillness. The field continues to breathe, but something within it has changed. Eurydice's presence is suddenly different, as if the life around her has stepped back by a fraction. The air cools again, the mist thickens near the ground, the stars begin to sharpen and their distant light feels less like beauty and more like witness. It is said that death in the old understanding is not merely an ending. Some believe it is a passage, guarded, regulated, kept by laws that do not explain themselves. In ancient stories, there are always rules you learn only after you have crossed the line. The living may speak the names of the dead, but the dead do not always answer. The living may stand near the mouth of the underworld, but they do not step through without consequence. The river runs, the gates stand, the guardians watch. And here, on this quiet field, those laws make themselves known without ceremony. Eurydice does not fall into chaos. She simply slips away, as if the earth has remembered an old claim. As if the ground has opened an invisible hand. Orpheus turns. Not dramatically, not with fury, but with a sense that something is wrong in the way a room feels wrong when a door has closed behind you and you cannot hear the latch. He looks for her in the dusk, and the dusk offers no answer. The fear in this story is not violent, it is intimate. It is the feeling of reaching for warmth and finding only air. It is the sudden hollow chamber inside the ribs where a voice used to be. Orpheus calls her name, perhaps once, perhaps many times, depending on the telling. But the field holds his words like mist holds moonlight. It does not return what he seeks. The grass sways indifferent. The flowers fold slightly as night deepens. And the silence now is different. It is not the silence of peace, it is the silence of absence. Where memory fades, a strange thing happens. The mind begins to search for meaning in every shadow. Orpheus walks the edge of the darker patch, as if tracing the outline of the moment that broke. He looks down at the roots, at the soil, at the faint track where something slid away unseen. He does not rage. That is the first mystery. In so many stories, grief arrives as thunder, as anger, as destruction. But Orpheus, it is said, listens, as if sorrow itself might contain instructions, as if the world which has taken something might also whisper where it has gone. He becomes still. He becomes quiet enough to hear his own breathing, quiet enough to hear the field settling back into itself, quiet enough to sense that the loss is not only personal, it is structural. A door has closed, not just in his life, but in the order of things. And the deeper mystery emerges. Why is the loss so sudden, so quiet, as if the world has agreed to look away? Some truths the ancients suggest arrive like dusk, unannounced, irreversible, soft enough to confuse you until you realize everything is different. One moment you are in a field with sunlight in your hands. The next you are standing in the same place, and the same place feels foreign. Marked by the moon, the field now looks like a map of what has been taken. The horizon is the same, yet it feels farther. The wind is the same, yet it feels colder. The stars are the same, yet they feel like eyes. The field that once felt endless becomes bordered. It becomes a chamber. And Orpheus stands at its edge, at the edge of an unseen gate. Not a gate made of stone, not one carved with warnings, but a gate made of fact. She is gone, and the world is not offering her back. He holds something in his chest, not yet a song, not yet even a sound. Only the first note of a music he has not dared to release, a note that trembles behind his teeth like a prayer, still deciding whether it will be spoken. In the final hush of this chapter, the night deepens completely. The mist spreads low across the grass like a shroud. The serpent is long gone, leaving only the sense that a threshold has been crossed. And in that sacred, unbearable quiet, we are left with a question that has no clean answer. Was this the world's cruelty or the world's law? Perhaps it was never meant to be understood. Perhaps it was only meant to be felt. And somewhere beneath the silence, the underworld keeps its quiet, waiting for the song that will try to follow. It is said that when grief becomes too heavy to carry, it begins to change the world around it. Not in loud ways, not with storms or broken mountains, but in quiet shifts, the way a familiar road feels suddenly older, the way stones look like witnesses, the way the night air seems to hold its breath as you pass. After Eurydice is taken into silence, Orpheus does not remain in the field. He cannot. The field has become a bordered place, a chamber of absence. And so, marked by the moon, he begins to walk. At first it is only a wandering, slow steps through sleeping grass, along a path that had once been ordinary. But the farther he goes, the more the landscape feels as if it is responding to his intent. As if the earth recognizes the weight he carries and adjusts itself accordingly. Trees stand a little farther apart. Shadows gather more patiently. The wind grows softer, as though it has learned a reverence. Whispers tell us there were ancient roads in Greece that did not belong entirely to the living. Paths between villages, between hills, where travelers left small offerings, coins, bread, a strand of hair, because some places were thin and it was wise to pass gently through them. In forgotten corners of the earth, people have always sensed these thinning points, a cave mouth that exhales cold air like a sleeping creature, a fissure in stone where the darkness feels deeper than it should, a riverbank at night where the surface of the water seems to listen. Orpheus walks towards such a place, though he may not name it. He only feels the pull, the quiet certainty that Eurydice has not vanished into nothing, but into somewhere, somewhere behind the veil. The focus of this chapter is a mystery older than any temple. Can sound become a key? Orpheus carries no torch, not because he refuses light, but because he is following something that does not need it. His hands hold what cannot be seen, yet can move the unseen. A song, shaped slowly from longing. A melody that begins as breath and becomes a thread. He does not play to entertain the night. He plays to speak with it. Beneath the silence, the first notes drift outward like incense. They do not strike the air. They settle into it. They pass over stone and brush against leaves, and each surface seems to remember that it once listened to music when the world was younger. Some believe that Orpheus' gift was not simply skill, it was devotion. He played as if each note mattered to the order of creation. He played as if the universe could be persuaded by gentleness. And perhaps that is why his song is described in the old telling as something that calmed wild animals and softened even the hardest hearts. Here on the moonlit road, the song becomes ritual. It does not demand, it asks. It does not conquer, it remembers. We enter softly into the spiritual logic of ancient Greece, a world where the underworld was not an abstract idea, but a geography of reverence. The dead did not disappear into emptiness. They traveled into a realm with rivers and gates, with laws and guardians, with quiet rulers who rarely lifted their eyes. The living spoke of that realm with caution, not because it was filled with drama, but because it was filled with permanence. And yet the myth keeps another truth beside it. The underworld is not simply below. It is near, hidden behind the familiar, waiting like a sealed chamber behind a wall of ordinary days. The night deepens as Orpheus walks. He passes ruined stones, old boundary markers, half buried, their carvings softened by centuries. He passes a broken shrine where someone once lit candles for a god whose name is now dust. The world feels ancient in the way it does when you are alone beneath stars, when every hill becomes a silhouette and every shadow seems to contain memory. Where memory fades, sound can sometimes reach farther than sight. Orpheus' music travels ahead of him like a guide. It slips into the hollows of the earth. It finds cracks in stone. It moves over the surface of rivers and sinks into their depths as if searching. In some tellings, it is near a riverbank that the veil begins to breathe. Water at night is never only water. It is mirror and passage. It holds the sky, but it also hides what lies beneath. The Greeks spoke of rivers that belonged to the underworld, names like whispers, Styx, Acheron, Lethe. Whether those rivers were literal or symbolic, the idea remains. Water can be boundary. Orpheus comes to a place where the air is colder, where the ground feels damp, where the stones are darkened as if they have been touched by a different kind of time. The moonlight here seems thinner. The stars feel farther away. And then the story allows a quiet contradiction to bloom. The living are told the dead cannot return. Yet Orpheus continues. He plays, and the earth listens. It is said that in the hush of his music, even stone seems to hesitate, like an old law pausing mid-sentence. The wind stills, the river's surface grows glassy, the insects quiet their small songs. Not because they are frightened, but because something sacred is happening, something that does not happen often. A melody is reaching for a door that was never meant to be opened. This is the forbidden knowledge hidden inside the title, that the world may have locks, but it also has keys we do not fully understand. Keys made not of metal, but of meaning. Keys made of grief refined into devotion. Orpheus's song is not loud enough to shake mountains. It is not meant to. It is meant to be undeniable in its gentleness. And perhaps that is why the myth survives, because deep inside us, beneath the mind's hard rules, we want to believe the universe can be moved by what is pure, that an ending is not always final if the plea is tender enough. As he approaches the threshold, the air grows heavier, like walking into a chamber filled with unseen dust. The ground slopes subtly, or perhaps it only feels that way, as if the world is preparing to tilt into deeper places. The darkness ahead is not empty. It is structured. It feels like architecture without walls, a gate without stone, a doorway made of silence. The chapter closes on a single image, a dark opening in the earth, perhaps a cave mouth, perhaps a fissure widened by time, framed by old rock and clinging roots, fog breathing in slow pulses, no torches, no guards visible, only the sense that this entrance has waited a long time for a voice like his. A doorway that was never meant for footsteps, now trembling with a gentle invitation. An entrance made not by force, but by a song that refuses to forget. And as sleep draws nearer, as the listener's thoughts soften like mist, we are left with a final, drifting uncertainty. Perhaps the underworld did not open because it was weak. Perhaps it opened because, for one quiet moment, it remembered what it once was, before it became a place of endings. And perhaps some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. It is said that there are doors in the world that do not creak when they open. They make no sound at all. One moment you stand among stone and wind and the familiar weight of the sky, and the next the air has changed, as if you have stepped into a different kind of time, as if your breath has crossed a boundary it cannot fully explain. Orpheus reaches such a door. Not a door with hinges, not a gate crowned with iron, but a threshold veiled and ancient, where the earth folds inward like a page turning in a book no living hand was meant to read. Beneath the silence, the cave mouth, or fissure, or shadowed hollow, waits in a stillness so complete it feels ceremonial. Fog gathers there, pale as ash, breathing in slow pulses. The rock around it is worn, star-marked in places by mineral flecks that catch faint light like distant constellations. And when Orpheus steps closer, the world behind him becomes quiet in a new way. Some believe the underworld is far below, a realm sealed beneath stone. But in forgotten corners of ancient Greece, people spoke of places where the veil thinned. A riverbank at night, a cleft in the hillside, a cavern that exhaled cold air even in summer. The underworld, they said, was not only beneath, it was near. It pressed close to ordinary ground, waiting like a chamber behind a wall. Orpheus crosses the threshold, and the air changes, cooler, heavier, threaded with a dust that does not belong to sunlight. It clings to the breath. It tastes faintly of stone, of water that has not seen the sky, of time held too long in darkness. The underworld is introduced like a vast library of silence, corridors carved from shadow and slow water, rooms that feel less like caves and more like memory itself, layered, endless, unarguing. The darkness here is not empty. It has texture. It holds echo but refuses to give it back quickly. It is as if the walls are lined with old stories, each one sealed, each one waiting. This chapter centers on the gate itself, the boundary of law that lives inside the universe. The question is simple and terrible. What must be surrendered to pass? In the world above, we surrender time in small ways, an hour slipping into afternoon, a season fading into another. But here, the surrender feels sharper. Here, the cost is not measured in minutes. It is measured in certainty, in warmth, in the simple assumption that life flows in only one direction. Where memory fades, the underworld begins. Stone steps descend, worn smooth by countless unseen journeys. Their edges are softened, as if even rock becomes gentle when it has carried so many endings. Dim water runs nearby, sometimes heard, sometimes only sensed as a dampness in the air. The rivers here do not sparkle. They absorb light like ink. Their surfaces are calm, but the calm is deep, like a sealed thought. In old tellings, there are names for these waters: Styx, Acheron, Lethe, rivers not merely of geography, but of meaning, oath, grief, forgetting. Whether they were ever mapped in the world above hardly matters. The myth uses them as symbols. Each river is a reminder that crossing is never only physical. It is spiritual. It changes you. The figures here are not monsters. They are guardians of balance. They do not threaten with rage. They watch with permanence. Their presence feels like a rule written into stone. Even if you cannot see them clearly, you feel them as you feel the weight of a mountain when you stand at its base. Charon is spoken of in the hush, ferryman of the boundary, keeper of passage across the dark water. Some believe he accepts a coin. Others say he accepts the quiet acknowledgement that you do not belong. Either way, he is not cruelty. He is function. He is the world ensuring that the living do not wander carelessly into the realm of the dead. And around him, the dead gather like mist. Not as a crowd, but as an atmosphere. A soft, pale presence, as if countless names are waiting to be remembered. Here, names are heavy, names are fragile, names are no longer spoken in sunlight, and yet they linger in the dark like faint writing on a wall. Orpheus moves through this sacred geography as one moves through a ruined temple, slowly, respectfully, careful not to disturb what cannot be restored. And then he does something forbidden in its gentleness. He sings, not loudly, not as a performance, but as an offering, carried on breath, shaped with devotion. The melody moves like starlight through a chamber. It touches stone without striking it. It settles on the surface of dark water without breaking it. It drifts into the spaces between the waiting dead, and something in those spaces trembles, something like remembrance. The paradox deepens. This place is designed for endings, but the song carries beginnings inside it. It carries fields in dawn, and the warmth of hands held in daylight. It carries the sound of laughter softened by love. It carries Eurydice's name, not as a demand, but as a prayer. And in the underworld, where everything tends toward silence, that prayer is not ignored. Even the guardians, who have watched centuries pass like drifting ash, feel a pause in their certainty. It is said that the underworld cannot be bribed by gold, but it can be moved by something rarer: sincerity that does not waver, a beauty that does not seek reward, a longing that is not selfish, but devoted to one lost presence. Some believe this is why Orpheus's song matters, not because it breaks the rules, but because it reveals something inside the rules that is usually hidden. That the law of the universe is firm, yes, but not always cruel. That even in the realm of endings, the world can recognize love as sacred. In the final reflection, we feel the underworld not as punishment, but as memory. Vast, patient, unarguing. A place that does not hate the living. It simply belongs to a different order. It holds what has been taken. It keeps what has passed. It stores the voices of the world the way a library stores books, quietly, endlessly, without judgment. Orpheus is allowed to stand within it, but only briefly, as if time itself is holding its breath. Behind him, the gate remains, a thin seam between worlds that could close without warning. Ahead, deeper shadows wait, corridors that lead toward rulers who rarely grant exceptions. The air grows colder as he moves forward, and the dust becomes thicker, as if each step takes him farther from the warmth of the surface. Yet his song continues, soft and steady, like a candle carried through a corridor of stone. And as sleep approaches, slow, gentle, this chapter leaves you with a quiet uncertainty. Perhaps the gate of no return is not a punishment. Perhaps it is a protection, a boundary that keeps the worlds from bleeding into one another. And perhaps on rare nights, marked by the moon, when a voice arrives with enough devotion, the earth does not open because it is forced. It opens because it listens. It is said that deep beneath the world we know, there is a hall where time does not hurry. No sunbeam crosses its floor. No wind stirs its corners. The air does not sparkle. It settles. And the silence there is not empty. It is arranged like a sacred archive, like a library that keeps the final pages of every life. Orpheus walks toward that hall as if walking into a dream he cannot wake from. The passages behind him are dim corridors of stone and slow water, etched with the quiet traffic of countless endings. Each step feels less like travel and more like surrender. Surrender of warmth, surrender of certainty, surrender of the simple assumption that the world must answer when we call. And then, at last, the corridor opens. We arrive at a throne room that does not gleam, but absorbs light like velvet night. The chamber is vast, yet it does not feel grand in the way palaces above feel grand. It feels ancient, older than gold, older than pride. The walls seem carved not only from rock, but from shadow itself. A faint mist lingers low, like dust lifted from forgotten scrolls. Here and there, stone bears spiral marks and star-like flecks, as if the underworld has its own constellations embedded in its bones. Beneath the silence, the sense of law is stronger than the sense of fear. This is not a place of chaos. It is a place of order that cannot be argued with. Hades and Persephone are present, not as cruelty, not as raging gods, but as the quiet authority of what cannot be undone. In forgotten corners of the old stories, Hades is rarely described as a villain. He is described as a keeper, a holder, the one who receives what all roads eventually deliver. His realm is a system of balance, a sealed archive where endings are recorded with the same calm as beginnings. And Persephone, she is the one who knows both bloom and burial. Some believe her footsteps carry spring because she has walked the path between worlds. She understands what it means to leave and what it means to return. In her, the myth holds its deepest contradiction, that life and death are not enemies but partners in an ancient turning. She is the gentle reminder that even the underworld is part of the world's rhythm. Orpheus stands small in this chamber of immense stillness. He does not arrive as a hero. He arrives as a petitioner. The focus of this chapter is the petition, an ancient ritual of asking for what the world does not want to give. Above in the living world, we ask for many things: for fortune, for shelter, for safety, for love. But here the request is different. Here he asks for reversal. He asks for what the universe resists. He asks for the dead to be returned. It is said that such a request must be offered carefully because it presses against the boundary that keeps the world from tearing. Orpheus carries no weapon into this hall. His only offering is a song made from love and grief braided together, as if sorrow has been patiently woven into something holy. He begins softly, not to impress, not to demand, to testify. The melody rises like a thin stream of starlight in a chamber that has forgotten starlight. It passes over stone, and the stone does not reject it. It passes over shadow, and the shadow does not swallow it. It moves through the hush where countless names have faded, and for a moment those names seem closer, as if memory itself has leaned forward to listen. Orpheus' music calls up the world above without describing it like a lecture. It simply remembers. A field in spring, sunlight caught in tall grass. The sound of rain arriving gently, bead by bead on warm earth. The quiet weight of a hand held at dawn, when the world is still pale and new. The way a promise feels when it is still intact. Whispers tell us that in the underworld, nothing can be carried in except what is true. Gold loses its shine, pride loses its shape, but a sincere longing, purified by devotion, can pass through cracks where other things cannot. The implied forbidden knowledge is this: even the rulers of the dead are not untouched by beauty, yet they must protect the boundary that keeps the worlds from blending. So the chamber listens with ancient patience, not because it is easily moved, but because it understands the weight of the offering. The song is not a bargaining chip. It is a witness statement written in sound. It is grief made articulate. It is love refusing to vanish without speaking. And for a moment, the story suggests an impossible tenderness. That law can bend, not because it is weak, but because even stone can remember what it once was. Some believe the underworld is made of forgetting, but here, memory is the force that matters most. Orpheus does not try to argue with death, he tries to remind it. He tries to show that what was taken was not merely a body, but a presence, something the world above cannot replace. The hall remains dim, the air remains cold. Yet something shifts, not a dramatic change, only a pause in the universe's certainty, a small opening in the rigid pattern of endings, as if the archive has turned to a page it rarely touches. And then, like a spell spoken with sacred gravity, a condition is given. Eurydice may follow, but Orpheus must not turn. A simple rule, so simple it feels almost merciful. Yet the simplicity is what makes it dangerous. The test is not placed on strength or cleverness. It is placed on the most fragile element of all, the human heart. In the silence that follows, the chamber feels even larger. The underworld does not explain itself. It never does. It offers a path, and it offers a rule, and it leaves the rest to the living soul who dared to ask. Why is the test always placed inside us, where the hardest gates are invisible? Some believe it is because the underworld cannot be crossed with certainty. It can only be crossed with trust, and trust is the rarest currency of all. It cannot be forced. It cannot be purchased. It must be carried, trembling, through the dark. Orpheus receives the condition like a candle placed in his hands. He does not celebrate. He does not speak loudly. He simply holds it, careful not to spill it. And as sleep approaches, the chapter fades on a quiet truth. Even in the deepest chamber of endings, the universe may grant a fragile passage, but it asks for something in return that is almost unbearable. Not blood, not gold, only restraint, only faith, only the courage to walk forward without looking back. Perhaps it was never meant to be easy. Perhaps it was only meant to reveal what we are when love is asked to trust the dark. It is said that the hardest journeys are not the ones that take you deeper. They are the ones that ask you to return. Because returning means carrying something fragile through a world that does not promise to hold it. Orpheus leaves the chamber of Hades with the condition resting upon him like a seal of wax, simple, clear, and heavy with sacred consequence. No turning, no looking back, no reaching for proof. Behind him, somewhere in the underworld's dim corridors, Eurydice is permitted to follow. But she is not permitted to speak, not a word to ease him, not a breath to reassure him. Only the quiet fact of her presence, unseen, unconfirmed, like a star behind cloud. The underworld becomes a corridor of waiting, not a place of chaos, but of patience. A vast archive of silence through which Orpheus must walk as carefully as one walks through a temple at midnight. The air is cool, threaded with ancient dust that drifts like memory disturbed. The water in the channels beside him runs slow, absorbing sound. Even his footsteps feel muted, as if the stone refuses to echo too loudly. This chapter is built from distance, from the slow rhythm of ascent that still feels like descent into uncertainty. Because the path upward is not lit, it is only hinted at, by worn steps that climb into darkness, by faint drafts of cooler air, by the subtle change in the weight of silence. Orpheus begins to climb, and each step feels like a vow repeated. Not spoken aloud, but held in the muscles, held in the throat, held in the careful restraint of a body that wants to turn. Beneath the silence, the unseen presence behind him becomes the central mystery. Eurydice follows like a shadow that belongs to the heart, not the eyes. She is there, and yet she is not allowed to be known. Between them stretches a fragile thread made from trust alone. No rope, no hand, no voice. only the promise that the gods have spoken true. Some believe this is the underworld's most subtle power, not the ability to take, but the ability to make you doubt what you cannot see. In forgotten corners of the old world, people feared not only death, but uncertainty, the way it can hollow a person from within. The underworld does not need claws when it can place a question inside the mind and let it grow. Orpheus climbs. The passage narrows and widens again, like a living throat of stone. Pillars appear, then crumble into rubble. Carvings spiral along the walls, star-marked and softened by time, as if the underworld itself remembers constellations from a sky it cannot see. The floor is damp in places, reflecting faint glimmers like distant moons, and the air holds old echoes. Not literal voices, perhaps, though some tellings suggest the dead whisper eternally, but echoes in the way a place remembers what has happened there. It is the feeling of walking through a corridor where countless feet have shuffled, where countless hearts have pleaded, where countless promises have cracked under the weight of fear. You can almost sense them, the ones who begged for one more day, the ones who offered anything, the ones who thought they could bargain with the unbending order of endings. Orpheus passes through that history like a candle passing through a hall of smoke. The myth's contradiction grows sharper with every step. The gods have granted the impossible, yet the terms are designed to awaken fear. Why must he not look? Some believe the rule protects the boundary between worlds, preventing the living from dragging the dead across too quickly, too violently. Others believe it is a test of faith, a ritual of trust, because only trust can cross what sight cannot. And still others whisper something colder, that the rule is designed to fail, because the underworld rarely releases what it has taken, and every exception must be guarded by a condition that can shatter under human weakness. Orpheus cannot look, he cannot confirm, he cannot touch, he cannot even speak her name as a request for reassurance, because the underworld is listening and words can become pressure. So he does the only thing he can do. He counts breath, in and out. Each breath becomes a prayer. Each step becomes a beat in a silent rosary of restraint. The pacing is meditative, stone steps, dim walls, the faint suggestion of a brighter world above. Sometimes far ahead, the darkness looks thinner, as if it is beginning to lift. Sometimes a draft brushes past his face, cool and clean, hinting at moonlight somewhere beyond these corridors. The possibility of the surface becomes a soft glow in the imagination, and that is when the test sharpens, because hope, when it grows close, grows loud. Orpheus listens for footsteps behind him, but hears almost nothing, and that near silence becomes a pressure. It presses against the mind, and the mind, starved of certainty, begins to create storms. What if she is not there? What if the gods have tricked him? What if he is misunderstood? What if the silence behind him is not patience but emptiness? The forbidden knowledge implied in this chapter is quiet and devastating. Love can be undone not by betrayal, but by longing for proof. The desire to see, to confirm, to anchor the miracle in something visible, that desire can become the very hand that breaks it. Orpheus climbs higher. The air begins to thin. The dust motes drift slower. A faint scent appears, less like stone, more like open space. A cool wind hints at moonlight, and for a moment the underworld feels almost reluctant, as if it is giving him a corridor toward leaving. The exit is near enough to imagine, and that nearness is dangerous, because in the final steps the mind becomes impatient. It wants the story to end cleanly. It wants to turn and see the beloved, to have the promise completed in sight. But the myth does not allow clean completion. It prefers the trembling edge. It places Orpheus in the narrow space between darkness and dawn, between rule and longing, between trust and the need to know. He reaches a place where the stone ceiling rises, where the darkness ahead looks softer, where the air carries the faintest suggestion of night sky, and he pauses, only for a breath. In that pause, the entire world seems to wait. The underworld holds its silence like a hand held still above water. And Orpheus stands poised inside a moment so fragile it could break from the slightest motion. where one small turn of the head could decide what history is allowed to remember. The chapter ends there, suspended, not with an answer, not with a triumph, only with the hush of a threshold approaching and the soft, sacred uncertainty of what the heart will choose when proof is close enough to taste. Perhaps it was never meant to be easy. Perhaps it was only meant to reveal us. And some voices, it is said, only echo when we are ready to listen. It is said there is a place where night and day meet, and neither one fully claims the world. Not dawn exactly, not darkness exactly, but a thin corridor of in-between, where the air looks pale and undecided, and the horizon feels like it is holding a secret behind a veil. Orpheus arrives at that corridor as if he has walked through a long dream. Behind him, the underworld presses close. Cool stone, slow water, dust that tastes like forgotten names. Ahead of him, the living air waits, lighter, thinner, touched by moonlight and the faint promise of open sky. And in that narrow space between worlds, the temptation arrives with gentle cruelty. Just one glance, just one confirmation. Whispers tell us that the most dangerous tests are never loud. They do not arrive as battles. They arrive as tenderness, as longing, as the soft ache of wanting to know that what you have been given is real. The mystery here is intimate and ancient. Why does the human heart reach for certainty at the very moment it must trust? We slow time to a near stillness. The stone around Orpheus feels like a witness, worn, patient, marked by spirals and star-like flecks, as if even rock has been carved into a record of choices made in silence. The steps beneath him are smooth from countless passages. The air holds a faint drift of mist that clings low, as if the underworld is reluctant to release what it has touched. Orpheus stands within a sacred diagram. The underworld is close behind, the surface world is close ahead, and he is precisely between them, poised like a needle on a compass that cannot decide which direction is true. He has been given the impossible. Eurydice may follow, but he must not turn. In forgotten corners of the earth, people have always known that rules can be more terrifying than walls. A wall is simple, you cannot pass. But a rule, especially a small one, invites the mind to play with it. It creates a space for doubt. It makes you imagine what would happen if you broke it. And the underworld, which speaks in silence, understands the mind well. Orpheus' breath begins to change, not in panic, not in anger, but in tenderness that cannot bear distance. His chest rises and falls a little faster, as if hope itself has moved too close to the throat. He listens. He tries to hear her footsteps. But Eurydice is not allowed to speak, not allowed to reassure. The path behind him offers only near silence, and near silence is never empty. Near silence is a mirror where fears appear. What if she is not there? What if the gods have offered a cruel kindness, permission with no substance? What if he has climbed alone, singing into a world that does not answer? The mind, starved of certainty, begins to create its own storms. The myth turns the simplest motion into a cosmic lever, not a sword, not a battle cry, only the turning of a head. It is said the underworld does not need to punish, it only needs to wait. It waits for the moment a human heart, aching with love, chooses proof over trust. Because proof is immediate, proof is warm, proof feels like safety. Trust is slower, trust is invisible, and invisibility is difficult to carry. Orpheus stands at the edge of living air. The darkness ahead looks thinner now, almost like a curtain lifting. He can sense the open world above, the faint coolness of night wind, the distant space where stars hang freely. The exit is close enough to imagine, close enough to taste, and that closeness sharpens the temptation. Because when something is nearly yours, your hands begin to reach, even if you tell them not to. Marked by the moon, the corridor brightens by a fraction. Dust motes drift, catching faint light like tiny wandering stars. The stone steps seem to glow softly, as if the earth itself is holding its breath. Orpheus's heart speaks without words, just once. Just to see her, just to know. Some believe that when he turns, it is not framed as failure alone. It is framed as a human instinct. Love wanting to look upon the beloved, to anchor the miracle in something real, a living face, a living presence, a certainty that can be held in the eyes. So he turns, not with defiance, with longing, with tenderness, with a devotion so intense it forgets the rule in the very moment it tries to complete it. And the law responds without anger, only with inevitability. The underworld does not roar, it does not strike, it simply reclaims. Eurydice is revealed in a brief, heartbreaking clarity, like a figure behind a veil, lit for a moment by starlight. She is there. She has been there, close enough that the air between them feels charged with the sweetness of a return. Her expression is not blame. It is calm sorrow, as if she has always understood the nature of gates, as if she knows that the underworld does not steal with violence. It steals with rules, with small conditions placed upon fragile human hearts. Beneath the silence, her presence feels almost weightless, like mist held in a shape for a moment before it dissolves. Her outline is soft around the edges, as if the underworld has not fully released its claim. And in that brief instant, Orpheus sees what he has been longing to see, the beloved returned, and also already slipping away. He reaches, not to grab, not to pull, but to touch, to confirm warmth, to confirm reality. But the world has changed its mind, or perhaps it never changed at all. Perhaps the rule was always the rule. Perhaps the gate was always a gate of law, not compassion. The second loss arrives quieter than the first, more profound. Eurydice is drawn back like mist returning to a chamber. No scream, no struggle, only the soft retreat of her presence, as if the underworld is gently closing a book. Orpheus's hand closes on nothing. Air, cool, empty air that still remembers her shape for a heartbeat, then forgets. The last image is small and devastating. A hand held out, fingers trembling, closing slowly as though it can grasp what has already become memory. And the underworld resumes its silence, as though it has reclaimed a secret it never wanted to share. In the final reflection, we are left suspended in sacred uncertainty. Was the rule a cruelty, designed to break him? Or was it a boundary meant to protect the worlds from blending? Was the glance a failure? Or was it simply the human cost of love? Love that cannot bear distance, love that reaches for certainty even when certainty is forbidden. Perhaps it was never meant to be solved. Perhaps it was only meant to echo. And some voices, it is said, only echo when we are ready to listen. It is said that after a great story breaks, the pieces do not scatter. They settle. They drift into the corners of memory, into the shelves of old libraries, into the quiet mouths of those who retell what they have heard. And over time, the fragments begin to change shape, smoothed by repetition, altered by need, softened by fear, brightened by hope. In the aftermath of Orpheus turning, we do not rush forward. We step instead into a different kind of chamber, one made not of stone, but of pages, a room behind the room, a place where myths are kept the way embers are kept, carefully, dimly, beneath ash. Whispers tell us that every myth has two lives. The first life is the story itself. What happens, what is lost, what is carried away. The second life is the retelling. What survives, what is changed, what is quietly erased. This chapter lives in that second life. Imagine a moonlit library where the air is thick with dust motes drifting in candlelight. The shelves are not made of wood, but of shadowed stone. The scrolls are not neatly labeled. They are stacked like sleeping birds. Each one holds a version, an angle of the same heartbreak shaped by the voice that spoke it. Here in this behind the myth chamber, the underworld keeps its quiet in a different way. Not by closing gates, but by allowing uncertainty to remain, by refusing to stamp a single meaning onto the story. We begin with a simple mystery. What was erased when the myth was repeated through centuries of different mouths? Some tellings soften Eurydice until she becomes almost a symbol, an outline of a beloved, a name that exists primarily to be lost. In those versions, Orpheus is the center, the hero, the warning. Eurydice becomes the prize behind the rule. But other tellings let her breathe. They give her presence. They let her sorrow be intelligent, her silence intentional. They suggest she is not merely being carried, but also understanding. In those whispers, Eurydice is not only taken, she is witness to the law itself. She knows the shape of the gate. She knows the cost of crossing it. And when she fades the second time, her calm sorrow feels less like victimhood and more like ancient knowing. Where memory fades, nuance often fades with it. A storyteller in one era may need the myth to warn against doubt. Another era may need it to sanctify devotion. Another may need it to explain why death cannot be bargained with. The same tale becomes many mirrors, each one reflecting what the listener fears most. We move through sacred uncertainties. Was the rule meant as cruelty or as protection? Some believe the condition, do not turn, was placed like a blade to cut hope, a test designed to fail because reversals threaten the balance of everything. If one soul returns, why not another? If one gate opens, why not all gates? The underworld, in this view, offers the impossible with one hand while quietly ensuring it cannot be kept. Other murmurs imply something gentler, that the rule protects the worlds from blending, that the living cannot bring the dead back by force, and so the dead must follow of their own accord, in their own silence, until the boundary is fully crossed. The glance, then, is not a moral failure as much as a disruption, a moment of pulling too soon on a thread that must remain loose until it is safely tied. And then there is the question of the test itself. Was Orpheus tested by gods or by his own mind? In forgotten corners of the earth, elders once said that the deepest trials are internal. The underworld may be a place, but it is also a state of being, the place in the heart where certainty disappears. In that darkness, the mind invents images. The mind demands proof. The mind turns silence into suspicion. Perhaps the gods did not need to trick Orpheus. Perhaps his own longing was enough. Perhaps the underworld did not set a trap. Perhaps it only held a rule and watched human nature do what it always does, reach for what it cannot bear to leave unconfirmed. The tone remains calm, as if we are reading faded ink with a candle held low. We linger on symbols because symbols are what survive when details dissolve. The backward glance becomes a crack in the mirror, an instant where reality splits, and what was almost whole becomes divided again. It is the moment the human need to know interrupts the human need to trust. The silence behind Eurydice becomes a sacred veil, not empty, not cruel, but holy in its restraint. A veil that asks, can you love what you cannot see? Can you carry faith like a lantern without looking inside it? And the ascent itself becomes a passage through memory, not simply climbing upward through stone corridors, but moving through the mind's own chambers, through fear, through hope, through the trembling edge where longing becomes hunger. The underworld in this reading is not only beneath the earth, it is beneath certainty. Some versions of the myth lean into punishment. They treat the story as a warning against disobedience, against impatience, against doubt. In those retellings, Orpheus turns because he fails, but other versions lean into tenderness. They treat the story as a lament for the human condition, that we love with eyes and hands, and yet the deepest love sometimes asks us to love without them. In that softer light, Orpheus turns not because he is weak, but because he is human, because the beloved is so close that the heart begins to reach before the mind can hold it back. And Eurydice's second fading becomes not a condemnation, but a sorrowful inevitability, like mist returning to the valley when the sun cannot quite keep it. The chapter does not resolve the contradiction. It does not choose one version and discard the others. Instead, it leaves a gentle question suspended, like dust motes hanging in a single shaft of moonlight. If love is strongest when unseen, why do we insist on looking? Perhaps we look because we are made of bodies and bodies hunger for certainty. Perhaps we look because the world has taught us to fear what we cannot confirm. Or perhaps we look because, in the moment of miracle, we want to anchor the impossible to something real, so it cannot be taken again. Yet the underworld keeps its quiet. It offers no final explanation. It allows the myth to remain what it has always been. Not a story with an answer, but a door that opens into deeper rooms. And as sleep approaches, as your thoughts soften and drift, you may feel the way these rooms extend, one beyond another, quiet corridors of meaning where no harsh conclusion waits. Only the echo of an old question, repeated gently in the dark. only the hush of a veil, only the sense that some truths are not meant to be solved, only meant to be carried. It is said that when a story cannot be repaired, it does not disappear. It becomes an echo. And echoes are curious things. They do not remain where they were born. They travel. They slip into stone and water. They hide inside songs. They wait inside the quiet between one generation and the next, until someone speaks the right name again and the air remembers. After the myth's central wound, after the turning and the second loss, the story becomes quieter and wider. It stops being only about one field, one descent, one gate of no return. It begins to move like mist across centuries. And Orpheus, the one who walked into the underworld with a song, becomes less a person and more a lingering presence. Whispers tell us his name clung to the edges of ancient life, inscribed softly in the margins of poems, carved into weathered stone, carried by traveling voices that knew the melody even when they forgot the words. In forgotten corners of the earth, people repeated the tale not because it was neat, but because it was true in the way dreams are true. Symbolic, unfinished, persistent. We follow the way his name lingers. Imagine a broken marble slab in a ruined sanctuary, its letters worn smooth by rain and time. Imagine a pottery shard painted with a lyre and a winding path. Imagine the faint outline of a figure on a wall, half erased, as if memory itself cannot decide whether to keep him. These are the places myths live when they leave the storyteller's mouth. Not in perfection, in fragments. And the focus of this chapter is the enduring phenomenon. Why does this myth return in so many eras, in so many voices, as if it carries a code written into human longing? Some believe it returns because it holds the shape of a desire we never outgrow. The desire to retrieve what has been taken, to step beyond the laws of loss, to bring back a name that has slipped into silence. Others believe it returns because it offers a terrifying comfort, that even the most devoted love cannot control time, that even the most beautiful song cannot permanently reverse the world's turning. Yet still the story persists. Because it does something rare, it places art at the edge of the impossible. Orpheus becomes, in many tellings, a figure of sacred music, someone whose voice touches boundaries that ordinary words cannot approach. In a world where most people meet grief with stillness, he meets it with sound, and not sound as distraction, but sound as prayer. Beneath the silence, that is his true strangeness. He does not deny the underworld. He addresses it. He does not pretend loss is a closed door. He searches for the seam in the wall where a door might exist. In some traditions, he becomes almost priest-like, a keeper of mysteries, a guide through unseen realms. His song is treated like a ritual key, not because it breaks the rules, but because it reveals the rules have texture. That law may be firm, and yet it can be felt. It can be appealed to. It can pause for a moment when something pure stands before it. The emotional arc shifts here, from heartbreak to reverence, not because the sorrow is gone, but because sorrow has transformed. Grief becomes not an ending, but a slow reshaping, like a river wearing down stone, shaping new passages without force. You do not see the stone change from one moment to the next, but return after many years, and the river has carved a new language into the earth. So too does Orpheus' grief carve something into the human imagination. It carves the idea that love may attempt the impossible. It carves the idea that beauty, soft, sincere beauty, can sometimes soften what seems unbending. And it carves a warning that is almost too quiet to notice, that the mind can undo miracles through fear. We drift gently through these contradictions as they echo in later art. In one era, the backward glance becomes a moral lesson. Do not doubt, do not disobey, do not reach for proof when the gods have spoken. In another era, it becomes a tragedy of tenderness. How could he not look when the beloved was so near? In another, it becomes a meditation on perception, how the unseen demands a kind of faith that the human body struggles to carry. These echoes are presented like starlight across water, seen but never fully held, because myths do not return to deliver a single answer. They return to ask the same question in different rooms. Why do we insist on looking? Why do we crave certainty? Why does love, which is so large, so holy, still tremble at the edge of silence? Where memory fades, the myth becomes a mirror for the listener's own life. Not in a blunt way, in a gentle, almost invisible way, because everyone has known a moment they wish to keep, a presence they feared losing, a farewell that arrived too quickly and left the world changed. And so the myth persists because it belongs to the private chambers of the human heart. In ancient times, in medieval reimaginings, in modern poems and operas, Orpheus reappears, sometimes as a grieving musician, sometimes as a mystic, sometimes as an emblem of art itself. The costumes change, the language shifts, but the core remains, a song reaching into darkness, asking for one life to be returned. It is said that the underworld, too, is an archive, a library of what has passed. And here in the final reflection, we return to that image. Vast shelves of human stories, each one a record of what we tried to retrieve from loss. Each one a testimony that we did not simply accept the closing of the gate. We asked, we prayed, we sang, we remembered. In that library, Orpheus becomes a symbol not of failure, but of courage. The courage to descend at all. The courage to love so deeply that the underworld itself must hear your name. The courage to carry hope through corridors of doubt, even if the hope breaks at the end. And perhaps this is why the myth survives, because it mirrors our nightly ritual. Each night we lie down and practice a kind of descent. We close our eyes. We surrender the world of sight. We let certainty loosen. We trust the dark to hold us without proof. We become, for a few hours, like travelers at the edge of the underworld, stepping into a realm of dream and memory, where rules soften and time becomes strange. And in that gentle surrender, Orpheus's echo returns, not to frighten, not to lecture, but to remind us softly that we are human, that we love, that we lose, and that we sing anyway. Perhaps the myth was never meant to be solved. Perhaps it was meant to be repeated, like a lullaby carved from ancient dust. And some voices, it is said, only echo when we are ready to listen. It is said that every story, no matter how vast its shadows, must learn to end like a candle, not with a sudden darkness, but with a soft thinning of flame until the room becomes quiet enough to hear your own breath again. So now, as the gates have closed and the corridors of the underworld settle back into their ancient stillness, we do not chase the last details. We do not press the myth for an answer it never promised to give. We let the story exhale. We return to simple images, moonlight on stone, a quiet river, a song fading into distance, a field once warm, now sleeping beneath a night sky, a threshold once trembling, now sealed by silence, a name once called, now held gently in the dark. Beneath the silence there is a tenderness that remains, not in victory, not in resolution, but in the quiet awareness that love and loss share the same doorway. That what we cherish most often stands nearest to what we cannot keep. That the heart in its devotion walks willingly toward gates it does not fully understand. We move through the myth one last time, but now as a dreamlike impression rather than a sequence of events. Orpheus is no longer only a figure on a road. He is the shape of human longing when it becomes music. His song becomes the sound of devotion, gentle, imperfect, persistent. A melody made not to impress the world, but to speak honestly to it. To say, in the oldest language of breath and tone, I remember, I still remember. And Eurydice becomes something quieter than a character. She becomes a presence that cannot be possessed, only honored. A soft outline behind a veil, a warmth remembered at the edge of sleep. In forgotten corners of the earth, people have always known that some loves cannot be held in the hand. They can only be held in the way the mind holds starlight, by receiving it, not grasping it, by letting it rest, not trying to trap it. So Eurydice remains sacred in her distance, not because the story is cruel, but because it is honest about the boundary that separates longing from ownership. The underworld too becomes quieter in this closing. It is no longer painted as horror. It is a sacred chamber of memory, a vast archive where names are kept safe in silence, like scrolls placed carefully on shelves, never thrown away, never mocked, never denied. In this chamber, everything that has passed is stored with patient dignity. The underworld does not hate the living. It simply keeps what the living cannot. Where memory fades, the myth offers its strangest comfort, that what is lost is not necessarily destroyed. It is held somewhere beyond sight, beyond the reach of proof, beyond the daily world's loud demands, and the pacing now becomes deliberately meditative. We invite the mind to loosen its grip on detail, to let the images blur into meaning. A river dark and still, reflecting a handful of stars. Stone steps descending into mist. A doorway framed by roots. A lyre's last note drifting away like breath on cold air. You do not need to hold these images tightly. You do not need to arrange them into a clear lesson. Let them pass through you like a quiet wind through tall grass. Let them settle where they choose. Because the implied forbidden knowledge in this ending is not dramatic. It is almost too gentle to speak aloud. That the most important truths cannot be proven, only carried. Like warmth in the dark. Like a name remembered without being spoken. Like trust that continues even when certainty is gone. Some believe Orpheus turned because humans are made to seek. We are made to look, made to confirm, made to anchor what we love in something visible, something tangible, something that cannot vanish without warning. Others believe the underworld's condition was not a trap, but a protection. That some doors remain closed not out of cruelty, but out of balance. Because if the boundaries between worlds dissolved, then grief and joy, ending and beginning, would lose their meaning. The cosmos would blur into a single unsteady dream. And perhaps Eurydice returned to the underworld because that boundary is sacred, even when it hurts, even when love begs, even when music reaches through stone like starlight. Or perhaps the myth remains unfinished, waiting each night for a listener to enter it gently. Because in some way we repeat Orpheus' ritual every time we fall asleep. We step toward a veil. We leave the bright world behind. We surrender proof. We allow the unseen to gather around us like fog, soft and patient. And if we are very quiet, quiet enough to hear the underworld's library turning its pages, we may notice that sleep is not only rest, it is also trust. It is also surrender. It is also a small descent into mystery, where the mind releases its grip and lets the world drift beyond our grasp. So we do not end with a lesson that has sharp edges. We end with a veil of calm uncertainty. Perhaps Orpheus's song mattered, even though it could not keep Eurydice in the living air. Perhaps Eurydice's quiet sorrow was not punishment, but wisdom, an acceptance of the gate's nature. Perhaps the underworld listened, not because it could be conquered, but because it could recognize devotion when it heard it. And perhaps the story remains in the world because it mirrors what we are: creatures of love, creatures of longing, creatures who look back even when we promise ourselves we will not. Now, as the last images soften, moonlight on stone, a quiet river, a song fading into distance, let them become lighter. Let them drift. Let the dust settle in the sacred room of your mind. It is said that some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and perhaps tonight you do not need to listen for answers. Perhaps it is enough to rest, to breathe, to let the myth remain a door that opens inward, into silence, into wonder, into sleep.